My mother-in-law would not listen to me when I asked her not to keep touching my baby bump, so I annoyed her more and booped her nose every time she touched my bump. I am 31 weeks pregnant with our first. We announced our pregnancy at 13 weeks, and everyone was super excited since they would be the first grandchild on either side. I started showing at about 4.5 months and initially tried to be patient with my mom, mother-in-law, grandparents, aunts, and a random old lady at the store when they wanted to touch my belly. I wasn't crazy about people constantly rubbing my belly like I was some Buddha statue, but let it go since everyone was excited. After a few weeks, I got touched out and politely asked people to stop or would nicely say no when they asked, which most people respected. Mother-in-law tends to be overbearing and pushy. Very much has main character syndrome. Gets pouty and grumpy when she doesn't get her way. She was the only one who continued to constantly touch my belly even when I tried to say no. She'd always say she's just so excited she can't help herself. The bigger I got, the more it happened. A couple of weeks ago, we were visiting DH's relatives for an event, and as soon as we walked in, mother-in-law made a beeline over to us. That day, I felt icky, big, tired and uncomfortable. You know what I mean? I put one hand up to stop her and try to cover my belly with my other hand. She brushed my hand aside and started rubbing my belly. So that's when I got super annoyed and gently booped on the nose. I even said, boop. She just looked really confused, and we ended up walking away to talk to other relatives. As we were leaving that night, she put her hands on my belly again, and as soon as she did, I booped her again. We saw her again some days later with one of her friends. Her friend asked if she could touch my belly, and I nicely told her my stomach was all touched out, and she was fine. No drama. While that was happening, mother-in-law snuck up on me and started rubbing my belly again, and I booped her on the nose again. She looked really annoyed, said how irritating that was, and asked why I kept doing it. And I told her that if she was going to keep rubbing my belly after I asked her not to, I was going to boop her on the nose. She got mad and said I was being childish and dramatic. That night, she called my husband crying and said I was being mean and embarrassed her in front of her friend. DH got annoyed with me and said she was just showing how excited she was and that she's from an older generation, so it wasn't nice of me to do that to her. Instead, he said I should have talked to her again and explained why I didn't want people rubbing my belly anymore. Update. I meant it as an amusing little vent about my mother-in-law when I posted it. But when I started reading all the comments, it made me stop and think about how often this kind of thing happens, how often my DH defers to his mom, and how he never has my back when it comes to her. I've been trying to psych myself up for all the boundaries stopping once Lo comes in about 7 weeks. But as I read through all the comments, I realized this wasn't normal, or at least it shouldn't be. I probably spent way more time reading about everyone else's mills, and it was really validating to see I wasn't the only one that struggles with their mother. I have a good relationship with my mom and dad, but, well, they are typical parents. They offer unsolicited advice, come to our apartment and move things around to help, etc. We disagree about stuff and argue and fight sometimes. But here's the thing, when I tell them to stop whatever they are doing or when we don't take their advice, they don't get mad. They don't say I told you so when we ignore them and things don't work out as we expected. When we fight, they don't hold grudges or cause any drama. And honestly, I can't think of any fight/argument that has lasted longer than the conversation where we fought. By the time we finish talking, either they or I will have apologized, and we will move on. No drama. And most importantly, they respect my relationship with DH and respect that we are adults who can make our own choices. I'm always walking on eggshells around mother-in-law. She's easily offended and really thinks she is the main character in everybody's life. She tells us what she wants done when she asks us to do something. DH never says no. And when I try to establish boundaries, he gets so frazzled that I don't want to do whatever mother-in-law says. I got really super pissed off. So I sat DH down and told him I could do this anymore and that I was not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to continue to prioritize his family over mine. I won't continue letting mother-in-law ruin special events or cancel plans when she asks us to stop that conflicts. DH started to get angry, and honestly, he looked like he was about to cry just at the thought of saying no to her. I used the baby bump rubbing as an example and asked why he thought it was okay for her to ignore my request to stop. He tried to say it's normal. She's excited. She's old. And finally, the classic "that's just the way she is." I pointed out that everyone else stopped when I asked them to. And even mother-in-law's friend who was with her asked first if she could rub my tummy. And when I said no, she wasn't upset or anything. I pointed out that my parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles all respected my boundaries. Then, as some of you suggested, I asked how he'd feel if my dad rubbed DH's belly or something like that. I think I broke his brain because he understood what I was saying but was still struggling with the idea of going against his mom. We had several conversations, and I told him that starting now, I'm establishing boundaries and that going forward, his family is not more important than mine, and his mom's wants are not more important than my boundaries. To start with, Christmas. My family has always opened family presents on Christmas Eve at my grandma's house with my aunts, uncles, cousins, etc. And as we got older, it wasn't really about the presents. It was more of a family get-together, and we'd all open a couple of presents and then open the rest when we got home. Then on Christmas presents from Santa with our immediate families before returning to Grandma for a late lunch with the family. But the lunch is more optional. BC, everyone recognizes that people have other family and obligations. So the Christmas Eve thing is really the important one. DH's family opens everything on Christmas morning and then spends all day at his parents' house, but mother-in-law still wants everyone to come over on Christmas Eve too. In the past year, DH and I would try to spend Christmas Eve with my family and Christmas Day with him. But without fail, mother-in-law would ask us to stop by to pick up gifts or some other lame excuse, and then she'd give us a hard time when I said we needed to go to my grandma's. I told DH that this year I'm not going to Mills for Christmas Eve. I'm not letting her cut into my family's time. And then starting next year when Lo is here, we will spend Christmas morning by ourselves. We can still do Christmas Eve with my family and Christmas dinner with his family. We've also been arguing a lot about my birth plan. His mom wants to be in the room when Lo is born and then wants to stay at our apartment for a while to help us out. I told DH none of that was happening. Currently, the only person I want in the room is DH. It would be my mom if I change my mind and want someone else. When he asked I didn't want his mom, I asked him if he'd want my dad watching, trying to push a watermelon out of his ass. He didn't find that as funny as I did, but I think it made the point. When the baby goes home, I don't want anyone visiting for the first week. We can reevaluate depending on how I feel. I don't want anyone staying. But if I change my mind, it will be my mom first, and then we can see about his mom staying. But that would depend on whether she's following our lead. It was a much longer and more difficult conversation than it should have been. D8 thinks his mom is the main character and should get priority. Christmas Eve was a mixed bag. We went to Mills around mid-afternoon, but I said we had to leave by 5 so we could get to my grandma's and spend some time with my family before dinner. Mother-in-law tried to get us to eat with them and then got upset when I said no. At 5, I said it was time to go, and she started guilting DH and trying to tell me we could stay a little longer, etc. I said no. We'd see them tomorrow. So tonight was time for my family. It was much more difficult to leave than it should have been, but I stuck to my guns, and we ended up leaving by 5:15. Christmas Day mother-in-law was still upset and didn't talk to me much. But apparently, she gave DH a hard time, and it sounds like he threw me under the bus. After Christmas, things were pretty tense between DH and me. He went to see his family for New Year, and I went to mine. His family was having a party and would stay up to ring in the new year. Being preggo, I just wanted something quiet and relaxing. But since mother-in-law asked, he had to go. When I said I wasn't even going to make an appearance, DH got all stressed out about what mother-in-law would say. She texted DH and me on a group text saying how disappointed and angry she was that I would disrespect her like that. I left her on read and haven't talked to her since. My next conversation with her will be about the birthing plan, which should be fun. I may chicken out and invite both our sets of parents to go to lunch somewhere and tell everyone the plan all at once. Even if DH won't have my back, I know my mom and dad will. I'm not sure what will happen with DH and I. I'll be honest. I'm not very happy with him right now, but I also know that changing a lifetime of behavior doesn't happen overnight. But we have 7 weeks to get on the same page.